Axial plane alignment. From something as innocuous as the post striking the component to more gruesome, mal-tracking patella and trapezoidal flexion gaps. Axial plane alignment plays an important role in planning of a well-balanced and well-functioning total knee replacement. Axial plane alignment has not been discussed well as there has been a lack of pre-operative defining the desired rotations. The femoral reference axis have evolved as per-operative landmarks and axes. Operative philosophies also have evolved into two major groups: measured resection and gap balancing. Can they be bridged? How do we do it? And how does change of rotation affect other things like varus valgus or flexion and sizing? These are the topics that we hope to cover in this small presentation. But before we launch into femoral rotations, we shall briefly look at tibial rotations. Tibial base plate rotations are normally based on the following anatomic considerations: a good lateral coverage, posteromedial bone uncovered, matching the curve of the tibia base plate with the curve of the medial tibial condyle. Kinematically, running the non-fixed trials through a full arc of flexion lets the tibial base plate home in on the correct rotation. Normally, the midline of the base plate is aligned along the medial border or the medial one-third of tibial tuberosity. The femoral rotations are more complex. Among the femoral reference axis, we shall discuss posterior condylar axis, surgical transepicondylar axis, white side line, proximal tibial cut, and the interrelationship between them all. Posterior condylar axis is the line joining the posteriormost points of both condyles. It is the easiest to identify during surgery. Surgical transepicondylar axis is the line joining the surgical medial epicondyle to the lateral epicondyle. It represents the origin of the collateral ligaments, and hence this line forms the axis for isometricity of ligaments for flexion and extension. The line which represents the femur anteroposterior axis was first described by Dr. Leo Whiteside and hence is also called the Whiteside line. It is also called the intercondylar notch line. It is the line joining the deepest point on the patellar groove to the highest point on the intercondylar notch. It is usually perpendicular to the surgical transepicondylar axis. The proximal tibial cut surface at 90 degrees of flexion is yet another axis on which femoral rotations can be based and is irrespective of the femoral anatomy. Thus, we have seen four axes on which femoral rotations are measured. Posterior condylar axis is the base on which all independent femoral instrumentations are based. The legs of the sizar rest under the condyles and represent the posterior condylar axis. When the anatomic landmarks can be well defined, the surgical transepicondylar axis is the most accurate. When anatomic landmarks are difficult to find, femur AP axis is a very good alternative. When balancing a trapezoidal flexion gap, proximal tibial cut helps align the femoral component to generate a rectangular gap. Thus, each axis is useful and important. What is striking and important to understand is that all these four axes that we have seen so far are axes used for intraoperative planning, performed after distal femur and proximal tibial resections. Unlike coronal plane planning, where the surgeon plans preoperatively for mechanical or kinematic alignment or something similar, unlike sagittal plane, where the surgeon plans preoperatively to size the component to restore posterior femoral offset, we do not have that luxury in axial plane planning. Preoperative methods have not evolved for the want of imaging and planning tools. Based on these four axes, two operative techniques have evolved: measured resection and gap balancing, with the aim to achieve a rectangular flexion gap. In measured resection, the surgeon usually sets the external rotation to 3 degrees, which is the average external rotation for the population undergoing total knee replacement. The femoral resection is then completed. Soft tissues are then released to achieve a rectangular flexion gap. The principle used here is follow the bony cuts according to bony anatomy and complete soft tissue releases as demanded from soft tissue contractures. The basic premise being correct bony deformities at bony level and correct soft tissue deformities at the soft tissue level. In gap balancing, the surgeon performs most releases first to correct the deformities to almost neutral. The proximal tibial cut is performed first. Instrumentation is then based on this proximal tibial cut. The principle is to perform femur bony cuts in reference to the tibial cut using soft tissue tension as a guide. Hence, it is compulsory to achieve 90% correction before proceeding, and it is necessary that the tibial cut is very precise. If we were to look for potholes, first with measured resection, we normally set the external rotation at 3 degrees. Work of Gurvareddy and others has shown that only 27.7% of Indian population has 3 degrees external rotation. The rotation varied from 0 to 6 degrees. Also, soft tissue releases are very difficult to fine tune. That is, 1 millimeter of release does not necessarily open up 2 degrees of the space. With these issues, surgeons turn to gap balancing, but it too has its own set of potholes. 90% of the releases need to be performed earlier. Quite often, it is not possible to complete all releases before taking the bone cuts, as soft tissue access may be limited. Also, the entire alignment is based on the tibial cut and soft tissue balance. Thus, errors in early soft tissue release and the tibial cut will lead to errors in femur placement, like a tibial cut in varus will lead to internal rotation of the femur, while a tibial cut in valgus will lead to external rotation of the femur. An inadequate tibial cut will correspondingly increase cuts in both distal and posterior femur. A flexion deformity will lead to a tight extension space, and gap balancing will increase the distal femur cut, leading to marked raising of the joint line. Thus, each system has issues. So the most commonly followed middle path evolved. The distal femur and proximal tibial cuts are taken as a measured resection. The posterior femoral cuts are tweaked looking at all factors, local anatomy and the proximal tibial joint line, thus ensuring lower errors. The joint line does not get raised very high. as extension gap is created and made rectangular first. The rotation is fine-tuned to decrease soft tissue releases in flexion. Thus, difficulty of fine-tuning flexion space is reduced. Now, let us look at what the literature is pointing to. Measured resection in the axial plane relies on defining the anatomic landmarks and drawing the virtual axis per-operatively. Gap balancing relies on the fact that after achieving soft tissue correction, the soft tissue tension should guide to achieve the anatomic landmark precisely without having to find for it. So here we have three columns, two of them by the same authors. The bracket shows the margin of error which was accepted. In the first column, with 212 cases where the implant was placed along the transepicondylar axis within an error range of plus minus 3 degrees in 41.5% cases with help of computer navigation. In the second column, we have 25 cases, an implant axis along the transepicondylar axis within an error range of plus minus 5 degrees in 48% cases with conventional instruments. Whereas the same authors, when they did not go searching for the transepicondylar axis but followed gap balancing, the implant was placed along the transepicondylar axis in 80% cases. In another cadaveric study, there was a huge range in finding the targets by the surgeons. The medial epicondyle varied by 22.3 millimeters and the lateral epicondyle by 13.8 millimeters. In a review from one of the huge proponents of gap balancing, Doug Dennis, the surgeon's ability to reproducibly identify accurately the bony landmarks used in measured dissection is limited. Because the gap balancing technique is less dependent on bony anatomy identification, it can be used to provide more reproducible flexion gap stability. The role of technology where landmark identification methods are intraoperative surgeon dependent will have the same difficulties. The intraoperative landmark identification methods where technology is used besides conventional techniques are computer navigation and imageless robotics. Hence, these technologies also fall prey to the same weakness. Landmark identification is difficult. CT-based preoperative 3D templating is the way forward. How do we do it? We use CT-based 3D templating using knee-3 We plan the femoral bone cuts precisely to achieve kinematic bony alignment. We perform the standard releases, which are the part of the exposures, then establish the extension gap first. We finally look at the flexion gap and tweak the rotation by plus minus 2 mm to make the flexion gap rectangular without having to worry about fine tuning by soft tissue releases. Thus, we bridge the gap between measured dissection and gap balancing. Amongst the other advantages of pre-op CT-based 3D templating is that the patella is in the natural position and hence it's easier to match with the component. It is possible to assess all the three-dimensional impact of increasing or decreasing external rotation and hence arrive at the most kinematic alignment. External rotation increases medial flexion space. But this increases varus during flexion. It helps improve patellar congruity in cases of maltracking patella. But with that, it also increases the component size. Hence, it has a ramification on the sagittal plane planning as well. A short preview of how rotation can be set. Rotation and size are interlinked, and pre-op planning can help achieve the best position and size for the individual patient. Vision is seeing beyond what is right in front. Thank you.